Thank you. Congrats to the Putney class of 2026. Thank you for inviting me to share in your celebration. Believe me, I understand what today means to you. Wow, I understand how truly amazing this moment is. And oh, by the way, nobody, no school in the Northeast knows how to make an entrance like the Putney graduates on graduation day. It's incredible. I remember this day 50 years ago in 1976 when I was sitting where you're sitting. The year before, I watched my older brother Leland graduate, and by the end of my graduation day, I was a complete mess. I'm looking at you all in awe because my face was just completely wet, totally consumed by the unbelievable reality of leaving my orbit of Putney friends. Then in 1978, my younger brother Clinton graduated, and then his son graduated in 2008, and then my daughter graduated in 2010, and then his other son graduated in 2011. So can you tell my family has kind of been here? This is kind of a very special place for my family. We've had a long lineage of King family members at Putney, and quite an inheritance we have in this place, this special place. I know something of inheritance. It was because of my mother's genius as an innovative educator, community organizer, and staunch advocate for progressive education that my brothers Leland, Clinton, and I came to Putney. Our father was a civil rights attorney in Albany, Georgia, and when Dr. King came through Albany in 1961, it was my father's office where he worked out of and my father's counsel that he took. Dad worked throughout South Georgia, where practicing law for a black man in 1961 could get you killed. We grew up watching Mom and Dad do unglamorous work during the civil rights movement. Even at age 6, I did my part, entering the fray of the American apartheid by desegregating my first grade class at an all-white public school in 1964. Then at 15, I arrived at Putney in the wake of the civil rights movement and found that I had not left home. The chores were different, the winters colder, the principle the same. Do the work, do it hands-on, and do it when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. 15 years after I left Putney, I stood on another piece of ground, a construction site in Lower Manhattan, where the bones of 419 African men, women, and children were unearthed by archaeologists. They had been there for 300 years, under a parking lot, and building basements, and under the forgetting of an entire city. Now I'm standing here 50 years after my own graduation, in part because Albany, Georgia, and Putney had already, between the two of them, taught me how. I'm honored that you asked me to come back from the future. I'm your future, right? 50 years. Because I came prepared to share a few insights. I've had a chance to reflect over these 50 years about inheritance work and staying intentional. In the wake of the civil rights movement, my brothers and I arrived at Putney with a toolkit of sorts, a toolkit comprised of our experiences, our unique point of view, our community. My parents didn't ask whether we wanted what we were inheriting. They simply lived in front of us until we understood that what they were doing was work, and that whether we chose it or not, we were now responsible for some part of it. Inheritance is not a gift. It's not a thing you put on a shelf. It is a conveyance of a responsibility that implies that someone before you stayed with this. Now it is your turn. So when Carmelita Hinton decided 91 years ago this country needed a different kind of school, who knows whether she thought she was doing the right thing? What matters is that she did it anyway. Like every class before you, the day you arrived at Putney, this experiment was placed in your hands. It is your inheritance. For years to come, you'll reminisce about this place, remembering the iconic physical reminders that marked your time at Putney, like the barn, the Putney Elm, the KDU, your dorm, and so on. But as I've learned from my work with marginalized communities, with creating monuments for people who have been forgotten, memory and preservation, people give meaning to places. I hope you understand how profound that is, because it means that you too arrived with your toolkit in hand to this institution. And in your own unique way, you have contributed to Putney's work and mission just by being engaged by the community. And the students who come after you will do the same, but they will bring something completely different to the table, which also means that it will always matter that Putney be intentional about bringing together a diversity of thinkers, creators, culture bearers, and activists like yourselves. It matters that Putney cultivates the conversations that should be happening on the ground and community necessary to engage those conversations. Putney provided you with the canvas to engage your toolkit. I don't know if you know that. Through community and classes and programs, and in my work, learning to bear witness, to negotiate, to collaborate, to confront, to disagree, to forgive, and to regenerate is essential to next level work. Without you, physical reminders will go silent. They don't get the work done, and they don't tell the story. You do. Putney was never designed to be a static experience, and neither are you. Putney is a constant work in progress, and so are you. Putney can be transformational, but so can you. No one expects you to leave through the same door you came in. Embrace and take inventory of what you experienced here. Consider your most transformative experiences. Honor every moment of your time and your contribution to Putney. Make it a part of the lexicon of your life. Build from it and take stock in what happened to you here. It will never, I promise you, it will never fail to inform you. You'll come back to it over and over again through college, grad school, through life. In 1991, I found myself challenging the actions of a presidential appointee face-to-face in a meeting at the top of a federal building. It was scary, scary business, and far from a glamorous moment for me. But I'm standing here, 50 years after my own graduation, to tell you, be brave. I tapped into my superpower because I watched my parents, but also in part because I had Putney. I had mucked stalls, pitched silage, stacked wood, wash dishes, and so much more. And if I were going to lose my job for stepping up, I had skills. But here's the deal. Your academic life at Putney is ending today, but your work program is not. You'll spend the rest of your future finding out whether Putney put in your hands, what Putney has put in your hands, that it's still in your hands. Some folks you'll meet won't have the muscle. They won't have the muscle for unglamorous work. They'll seek the credit, the title, the post, the photograph. Translation, they don't want to do barn. But I'm not worried, because many of you will leave here and step up. You'll recognize barn duty when you see it in its thousands of disguises. It'll look like that committee no one wants to chair, the words no one will want to say, the reparative justice no one wants to champion, the neighbor no one wants to check on, or the child that no one wants to sit with, much less the document no one wants to read, and the grief no one wants to witness. At the end of the day, my message to you is, don't skip barn. That's where life is. On being intentional, whether sitting in Sunday night meeting, I don't even know if you all still have Sunday night meeting, but we did anyway. But whether sitting in Sunday night meeting to bear witness and listen to others, or participating in Sing, where your voice is among other voices, not a solo, not a spotlight, but a part, or walking and working through Vermont winters. In many ways, these are exercises in the discipline of presence and not looking away. Your generation may be asked to exercise this more than any generation before you. The discipline of presence, the discipline of not looking away. You are coming of age in a country that has made distraction into an industry. Your attention is its product. The forces are aligned against your ability to stay with anything. A thought, a book, a cause, a grief, a promise, a place, a person. Fortunately, Putney continues to quietly and stubbornly train the opposite muscle. So we'll count on you to use that muscle with abandon. The success around my work in realizing our nation's first national memorial honoring the lives of enslaved and free African people was rooted in my ability to stay. 20,000 people had been forgotten under the streets of New York City because it was easier to forget them than remember. What my colleagues and I did over many years was to refuse to look away. That is all. Nothing heroic. We were just stubborn. We stayed with something the city had chosen to pave over until the city had to see it. There may be a time when you're asked to look away from a friend in trouble, from an injustice that is inconvenient to your career, from a truth about your country that is harder to hold than the story you were raised on. Whether you stay is the measure. It is the measure that finally counts. Everything else, the degree, the badge, the job, the title, is decoration on the question of whether, when it came to it, did you stay? You're graduating in 2026 in a United States that does not yet know what it's going to be. That will be decided in part by you, by whether the adults you become are willing to do the work, by whether you're willing to stay. Let me share one last thing before I leave. Right now in New York City, I'm working to bring 7 individuals home. They are the remains of 7 African-descended human beings who were enslaved by the Dutch in northern Manhattan, where there were Dutch farms. They died in the 17th and 18th century, and whose bones are currently being held by the American Museum of Natural History. Over the next year, my colleagues and I expect to complete the design for a memorial and eventually return the remains from the museum back to the site where they were unearthed unceremoniously, past Central Park, through Harlem, up to 212th Street and 10th Avenue and Inwood, where they will be reinterred at a sacred site. The memorial will be built there, and we do not know, and will never know, the names of most of these individuals, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They are ours. What matters is they give meaning to our nation. I'm telling you this because at 18 years old, sitting in your seats, I could not have told you, I told you I was coming back from the future, I could not have told you that 50 years into the future, I would have a career having global reach, fighting for reparative justice for those who were victims of what the United Nations has officially declared as the gravest crime against humanity, the transatlantic slave trade, and racialized chattel enslavement of African people. That I would be collaborating with with international authorities, archaeologists, artists, architects, filmmakers, journalists, and marginalized indigenous people and African communities, that I would reclaim and memorialize sacred sites belonging to indigenous people who were dispossessed of their land, and the forced migration of African people enslaved throughout the Atlantic world. I did not know that then. How foundational my pursuits at Putney would be for my work today. But like me, you will discover for yourselves over time. But I'm not worried. I have before me a promising class of Putney grads. So I came back from the future to tell you, go do the work. Stay with what others will not. And don't forget your toolkit. Be revolutionary and carry what you've been given to whatever ground is yours to stand on. Godspeed to the extraordinary Putney class of 2026.